like to call the budget meeting to order. All members are present. Any public? There's no public comments.
No public comments, just approval of the agenda.
Approval of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, agenda is approved. Okay, the budget process. You want to take us into the budget process, Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Just want to outline, first of all, at a high level, again, the changes that have taken place since August when the school board approved the fourth draft of the budget, and really what we're going to be asking the school board to take a look at next week. Want to talk about a referendum approved version of the budget and what that looks like, as well as some information about the tax levy that I think is important to review. So to begin with, the changes that have taken place since August, there's been a number of them. At a high level, we talked during the annual meeting about the fact that the student count takes place in September. The revenue limit formula has to be adjusted in October based on the actual student count, as well as the state equalization aid amount that was certified last week. The revenue limit formula is down by about $300,000 from what we were planning. That is directly due to the student count in September. And one really important piece of information that I'll just share with the committee, and I'm definitely going to point it out to the whole school board next Monday night to make everyone aware of it, is Waunakee is actually now considered a declining enrollment district in the 2020-2021 school year because of how significant the drop was from last September to this September. That's something I certainly did not expect to see in my tenure in Waunakee, but I definitely want to point that out to everyone because I think that that's not something that people would expect to see. And in the revenue limit formula, there's actually a 1-year aid or exemption that's provided for districts that are in the declining enrollment exemption. That then is removed in the second year of being in declining enrollment if you still continue in declining enrollment. But I just wanted to share that information because it was quite surprising when I did updated the revenue limit formula to see that. And when you see lists of declining enrollment schools in 2020, 2021, I don't want you shocked to see why is Waunakee on the list? But we're going to be on the list of declining enrollment schools, as well as many other districts. But it's just not been something that's occurred in this district for a very, very, very long time. A discussion regarding enrollment like that declines. Basically, there was a number of expenditure budgets that needed to be updated as well. Examples of that are identified in the notes. You can see things like the high school field house project. So we had to add into the revenues the insurance settlement, and we had to add into the expenditures the project to repair the field house. So there were a number of changes that needed to be made going back between August and now. But I really want to make sure I call your attention to some of the high level issues and changes regarding this budget. The first thing, Rebecca, if you could open up the document called Final Draft Referendum Approved for a moment. And if you wouldn't mind going to the last page on this document. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands what's happening if the referendum is approved and what that impact is on the budget and the tax levy. So what you're looking at right now on the screen is Fund 39, the district's debt service fund. If the referendum is approved, the property tax line in Fund 39 would decrease to correlate with the amount of the referendum. In addition to that, the line of the budget that's called principal owed would decrease as well. What that means is that we would then no longer be doing what is called a debt service defeasance, or paying down our debt faster than what's called for in the debt service schedule. So what you see identified here in orange is the action that would be taken if the referendum is approved. And then Rebecca, if you could slide up, please. I can share then the corresponding impact on Fund 10, if you want to keep going a little bit higher. So right there, please. A little bit lower right there. So in Fund 10, oh, a little bit lower. Nope, the other way. Thank you, right there. See the orange? The orange highlight? Right there. Yep, right there. So what we would be doing if the referendum is passed in Fund 10, we would be creating a budget for COVID school reopening costs, again, in that same dollar amount of $2.127 million. The school board would then, the budget committee first, and then the entire school board would then be responsible for approving what expenditures go against that 2.1 million. You heard Jack during the annual meeting discuss a number of the expenditures that have currently been paid for and approved, but the school board would then have to evaluate those expenditures and seek to identify which of those expenditures are then going to be allocated towards that 2.1 million. An example of one of the discussions that would need to take place is the HVAC system enhancements. The school board approved those enhancements out of Fund 41 during the month of August. The reason that that was approved out of Fund 41 is that is where we had the resources available to pay for an HVAC system upgrade. However, if the referendum passes, the school board will have the ability to assign those HVAC system upgrades back to Fund 10 and towards these expenditures identified in the orange highlight. So I just want to make sure you're aware of those are the type of decisions that would need to be discussed if the referendum is passed. And Rebecca, if you want to go up a little bit to one of the previous pages, and we're going to look at the Fund 10 revenues on the property tax line right there. So the other change, excuse me, that would occur is while we are decreasing the property tax levy in Fund 39, we are increasing the property tax levy in Fund 10 by a corresponding amount. So this orange highlight shows you what would happen in the Fund 10 property tax line. And Rebecca, if you want to go back to the next page. I'm sorry, the other way. Let me keep going. And right there is perfect. So what you see highlighted there in orange are the two changes to the property tax levy if the referendum is approved, but the total school levy line remains the same. So it's important to understand that next Monday we will be asking the board to approve two different versions of the property tax levy, but both of them have the same bottom line. It's just there's a difference between the Fund 10 and the Fund 39. Another point I want to make regarding this topic that I think it's going to be important for board members to weigh in on this tomorrow night during the discussion, because this is not something that Randy and I have the ability to speak to. This is only something that a board member who will be making this decision can speak to. And that is really the question that will probably come up tomorrow night regarding, well, what happens in year 2, 3, 4, and 5. I will say that the intention of when the board approved that resolution was to make this shift between Fund 39 and Fund 10 and to keep that shift in place without increasing the taxes in Fund 39 for a debt service defeasance. And what I mean by that is the intention behind this was to move the $2.1 million from Fund 39 to Fund 10 for the length of the non-recurring referendum. But it is absolutely accurate to say, under Wisconsin state law, the school board approves the tax levy on an annual basis, and the school board does have the ability next October, if the board so chooses to do another debt service defeasance, which would then increase the overall property tax levy. So that is something that I expect to come up tomorrow night. That is a question where I can only answer what the intentions are, but I cannot answer what the sitting board members will be doing next October and what they would be approving for the tax levy. And I just want to make sure that makes sense to the board members, and ask whether or not you feel comfortable, if that question comes up, speaking to what your intentions are as a board member.
Mark's got a question.
I've got a couple questions. So, one, it's connected to this, so do we have any guesstimate at all as to the budget repair bill and what impact that might have?
Well, as of right now, when the state shared their information, which was somewhat recently, regarding their fiscal balance as of 6/30 of 20, their balance was in a better situation than what they were projecting. And as a result, discussions regarding the need for a state budget repair bill have stalled or have not moved forward. Now, that doesn't mean that discussion can't begin again if the state gets a new update, let's say 3 months into the next fiscal year, that shows that that situation has changed. But as of right now, there is a less likelihood of a state budget repair bill than there was a few months ago when we were discussing this possibility.
Okay. Then, are all options on the table? I know there's a number of board members who would like to use unused COVID funds towards potential maintenance projects. But do we also have the option of moving some of that back into Fund 39 if we wish to?
Sure, great question.
To pay off debt.
Yep, so once that action occurs next Monday, so that will be to approve 2 different versions of the tax levy. Only one of them can be certified, and the board would be locked into that action for the 2020-2021 school year. The board is not locked into that action in future fiscal years. A revenue limit referendum only gives the board the authority to go up to that dollar amount. So in a future year, a board could choose to do something differently. But in the 2020-2021 year, we will be locked in
Sure.
because we have to act on a levy next Monday prior to knowing the results of the referendum.
So a potential response tomorrow night could be that if the COVID expenses are less, we would choose to withdraw less from Fund 39 in the future, possibly.
That is an action that absolutely could be taken by the school board in the 2021-2022 year. Yes. But as far as the question that will likely come up, I certainly can answer the question from, the technical perspective or really the intention, but neither Randy nor I are going to be able to state, because we won't be obviously voting on this, what our intentions would be that we would be doing next October. And it is important to keep in mind, state law allows a school board to approve a debt service defeasance any October that you would choose to do so. So if next October the board were to approve the $2.1 million in Fund 10 and also do another debt service defeasance, let's just say use a dollar amount of $1 million, then absolutely the property tax levy would be changing as a result of this referendum in the second year. So I do think we are going to have school board members speak to that topic if it comes up tomorrow night, as to the fact that your intentions when approving this referendum was not just to only move the $2.1 million this year, but your intentions were to not go above $2.1 million between a debt service defeasance and a revenue limit exemption. Does that make sense to everyone?
That does. So do we jeopardize future withdrawals from that 2.1 million if we don't go up to the full amount in 21-22? For each, is that a decision that's made on a yearly basis?
I mean, if you under levy, if you
Yes.
don't want to go up to the max that you're allowed.
So-
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. What you would be doing is under levying the maximum amount of funds available in the
No,
revenue
I guess that's not my
limit.
question, but I guess that would be an option for the board
Yes.
to do, which would then, the levy could go down, but the amount to be pulled out would be less. But I'm saying if the COVID expenses are, let's say, half in 21-22 what they are this year.
Yep.
And what you could do is
Can-
pay for pay the expenses and then do the other $1 million back into debt defeasance, so you're paying down debt.
So we could do that, but if we do that and we want the full 2.1 in the next school year, does that jeopardize us from doing that?
I would say, I mean, that's a good question. I would say if because we get to the point where we feel that we're able to meet our budgetary needs within our existing Fund 10, and we're looking to, shift back to paying down debt, it would make sense to do that on a permanent basis.
Okay.
That we would have come to the conclusion that our Fund 10 is sufficient to meet our needs. We want to move X amount of funds back to the Fund 39. Because as Randy mentioned, that would then, kick in a term called under levying the revenue cap formula, which would be fine. The board would be choosing to under levy what legal authority they have and reinstitute a debt service defeasance. So I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because that is a very good answer to that question tomorrow night. Is that absolutely is something that the school board members would have the ability to do. I think what the members of the public are going to be looking for is a commitment from the members of the board that the intention would be between Fund 39 debt service defeasance and Fund 10 revenue limit authority, not to go beyond the $2.1 million that is being asked for in this referendum. But by state law, the board could choose to do that. So I just wanted to make sure we covered that. There was a letter to the editor in the Tribune last week that really referenced that concept, and that letter is accurate. I mean, the board does have the ability under Wisconsin law to, in year 2, 3, 4, and 5, to do both things. You would have the ability to levy in Fund 10 under the authority being given to you in that referendum, and also add back in a debt service defeasance. So it would take the board members to state to the public who might be bringing that topic up tomorrow night that that is your intention to remain within that dollar amount, and the intention was not to increase the tax levy in 2020, 2021, or the subsequent 4 years. And I just wanted to make sure that that made sense to everybody.
It does.
Okay?
Yep.
Anybody have any other questions on this referendum approved piece? Otherwise, we can have Rebecca jump out of this. And Rebecca, if you could jump into the first document, the final draft. And if you could go to, if you could just scroll down to, I think it's page 4. Oh, you can keep going. It's the tax levy page. You can keep going right there. You can go to that page. So what you see in this draft of the budget is the base budget, which was basically referred to as the status quo. So this would be the budget with the funds available if the referendum authority is not approved on November 3rd for the general fund to levy additional dollars. So what you would see in this version of the budget is you would see a Fund 39 that's at that 9.5 million. That does include the concept of the debt service defeasance. And you do see the general fund tax levy, excuse me, which is a slight decline from what the board approved in August because of the fact that the revenue limit formula has been reduced. So what you see in your board book is the two different versions of what that budget looks like. One that's more status quo without the revenue limit authority from November 3rd, and the one with the orange highlights is the one that references if the referendum is approved. So at this point, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have about this status quo version and any of the changes that we needed to make based on the financial variables that changed since August. I'd be happy to jump into any of those in more detail and answer any questions that you might have regarding any of those topics.
Steve, you mentioned the difference in revenue, about 315,000, I think.
Yep.
Did that take into account the one-time funding for schools in decline?
Yes, that did take that into account. In the declining enrollment exemption is very small for our district. It's in the 20,000s. It's not a large number. And that's because we're just barely into the declining enrollment exemption. But the fact that we did dip into it was the surprising factor, but we are just barely into it. And so that dollar amount is pretty small, but yes, that does take that into account.
Okay.
Steve, if we had, many of our students that left this year, if they come back next year, we don't get the full amount of aid for those kids as they return next year, do we? So we would still have some loss of state aid because, is that 3 years to get them back?
Yeah, that's a great point, Joan. So in the revenue limit formula, it takes 3 years for a student who is new to us or who joins us for the full impact of the revenue limit formula to take place. That's because the revenue limit formula is a 3-year rolling average. So in our normal environment, when enrollment increases, it takes 3 years for the full impact of that enrollment increase to impact the revenue limit formula. So yes, that's exactly correct, Joan, that it takes 3 years in the revenue limit formula for that to factor in. In the state equalization aid formula, the September count from this year is a factor for the state equalization aid next year. And as an impact of our enrollment declining, the Waunakee School District actually we will become less property wealthy because you're dividing the existing property values by the number of students, and that actually brings down our property value per student. So that's another interesting variable that's going to occur because of the student enrollment decline. It will definitely impact the state aid formula as well, and that impact will be seen next year.
So, Steve, of those 70, are those almost 100% open enrollment out, or are they actually just leaving the district?
The majority was leaving the district.
Okay, because if they were open out, we would still count them?
We would still count them exactly if they're open out. We did have an increase in open enrollment out. We typically have had very few open enrollment out students. So we did have to adjust the budget to account for the increased number of open enrollment out students. It is still a very small number. Our open enrollment out numbers compared to districts around us is tiny. We have very few students opting for open enrollment out, but given our historical numbers, it was an increase from what we've seen in recent years, which does require us to, in this current year, spend the $7,000. But to answer your question, it was resident students where we saw the most significant impact of the enrollment decline.
So would those students be like at a St. John's or a country day school? Is that where they went and they made, so they're still our residents?
The most likely result is enrollment in private schools or decisions to provide homeschooled options instead. We did see some shift to open enrollment out, but it was maybe, I can't remember off the top of my head, like maybe 12 or 13. So that doesn't really account for the numbers that we saw. So it's definitely more related to other educational choices, either private schools in our community or private schools in the region or homeschooled options.
Okay. Any other questions?
If there's no other questions on this document, I'm just going to ask Rebecca to bring up the tax levy document. There's a couple pieces of information. I think it's important always for board members to be aware of what's happening in the broader community. So this is something we talk about every year, the way that the property tax levy impacts the various municipalities in the district. Every single year, we see wide variations as far as the impact and the way different municipalities are affected by the property tax levy by the district. I want to point out a couple things. So in the lower right-hand corner, you see the overall percentage difference in the property tax levy from last year to this year is 3.17%. The municipality that's the closest to seeing a 3.17% is the town of Westport. So when the residents of the town of Westport read in the paper what the tax rate is and what was approved by the board, they're going to be the ones that see the closest correlation between what was approved by the school board and their property tax bills. The village of Waunakee is seeing a 1.24% increase in the property tax bills. So if a village of Waunakee resident read in the paper that the school board approved a tax levy increase in dollars of 3.17%, the average village of Waunakee taxpayer is not going to see that. The village of Waunakee is only receiving a 1.2% increase of that additional property tax levy. So the residents of the village of Waunakee will not see a 3.17% increase. They will see an increase much closer to the 1.2%, which would be in effect for the average typical home. But you do see in the town of Springfield a 10.69% change in the property tax levy from the year before. The question when that occurs is always why? Why is this happening? It is happening because the town of Springfield's property value change from the year before is resulting in a larger percentage of the school district's property tax levy being assigned to the town of Springfield. So in this case, the town of Springfield will now be receiving 3.8% of the school board's approved property tax levy, which is a 10.69% increase in the total dollars levied. So if you are a property taxpayer in the town of Springfield and you read in the paper about the school board approved tax increase of 3%, you are not going to be seeing a 3% increase in the property tax levy because your municipality is getting a larger share of the overall school tax levy. You also see the continual changes that are occurring in the city of Middleton portion of our school district. As you know, there is growth occurring in the community of Bishops Bay. There are very significantly sized apartment buildings that have been built in the last couple of years that are coming onto the property tax roll. As those buildings are added to the equalized value, the percentage of the value that is being assigned to the city of Middleton continues to change. It is fair to say that there has been a frustration expressed by City of Middleton residents who are in the Waunakee Community School District by these continual valuation changes from one year to the next. I do think it's fair to say that there has been some challenge at the state level accurately capturing these changes from one year to the next. And there have been issues that have come up on an annual basis regarding this. We do get phone calls every year regarding this topic. And the best we can do is share the information that you are seeing on this screen right now. As a school district, we do not receive any information besides what you see on the screen. It makes it difficult to try to answer taxpayers' questions. As an example, as a board member, if you are approached by a taxpayer from the town of Springfield, the only information that we have that we can share is we know that their percentage of the total school community's tax has increased from the year before. Why? We don't know. The state of Wisconsin provides this equalized value figure. They provide it in October, and they provide no supporting information to go with it. So that is always one of those very difficult conversations, because on our end, meaning the school district end, all we can do is share with the public what I'm sharing with you right now. We can share the history, but we do not have any ability to go deeper than that. And I do know that that causes frustration for taxpayers. But I always think it is important to share with board members so you see what's happening on an annual basis, and at least you are aware that these type of changes are occurring. Any questions that anybody can think of regarding this?
So if we get any questions regarding this, we just send them to Steve.
Absolutely. What I do is I share the information that we have. I do reference the history that we do publish on our website. I do acknowledge the concerns and the frustration from taxpayers, excuse me, who are seeking to understand why and are seeking to obtain additional information. And the best we can do is to reference them as to where the data is coming from, when it is received, and in the information that we have available to us. One other piece to just share, again, next Monday night, you will see two versions of this form. You will see the one that's in front of you tonight, which I'll call the status quo, and you will see the one that references the referendum approved version. I do want to just make sure, again, I note that this was the exact same action taken by the school board in October of 2014. So the action taken by the board in October of 2020 is a uncommon event to occur in schools, but it is a common event to occur when you have a November referendum. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we're good, Steve.
Okay.
Any other comments?
You need a motion on these things to approve them, to forward them to the
Yeah,
board?
yes, thank you. I would be looking for a motion from the budget committee to move these documents forward for consideration on Monday, October 26th.
Can we do all three of them? Or do we have to do-
Yep, you're just adopting the budget as it's moving forward, yep. So one motion.
So Mark
Yep.
made the motion,
Second.
John seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none?
Is that all you need, Steve? Is that approval?
That's it. Thank you very
All right.
much.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you,
Motion to
Steve.
approve? Having,
Thank you.
Adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Great.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. We're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Surprised you live in Springfield, but-
I do.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Great to see you tonight.